And hello, everyone. I think we should be streaming. Let me check that everything is going well. And yes, I believe we are running. It says that the stream is live. So yeah, I'm so glad to see you all. Apologies for not streaming last week. I did 7 hours of streaming on other channels, so I didn't have an opportunity to stream on mine. I did four different streams with Al Fadi, Reason Dances, Bob the Builder, and another one. So, so yeah, Tony, welcome. Horse, welcome. Carol B, good to see you. Built to Speed, welcome. Freethinker, Sergeant Grinch, Cogito, all of you, good to see you. Um, Adrian Deku, Zahar, welcome all. Yeah, let me just see the live chat. Yep. Okay, yeah, as I said, I did 7 hours of streaming last week on different channels, four different shows, so I was a little swamped. And okay, so let me jump into some new stuff. So basically, you were not going to believe this, but I got a call from a guy called Sam Shamoon. You may have heard of him. Um, he last contacted me July last year, or maybe prior to that, but the last contact I had with him was in July, and he has invited me onto his channel at the end of this month to do this talk. So this is what the thumbnail looks like right now. Adrian, thank you. Always a source of information. No, thank you very much. Yeah, so I will be talking about Muslims, Masons, and Gnostics, and what these three have in common, including the connection to Baphomet. So, yeah, so this will be interesting. For those who don't know, I've got a number of talks on this topic on my channel on Gnosticism, on Freemasonry, Islam, and of course the KKK. Few know Emmanuel. Hey, welcome. So nice to see you, James. Welcome. Jazzy Ways. Yep. So for those who don't know, this here is the original KKK uniform, right? So originally they had this Christmas looking uniform, this Father Christmas looking thing with white and red. And they had the Islamic symbols. So the KKK originally used this Islamic crescent and star before they started using the cross, of course. So that was the original KKK. And Baphomet was one of the names for Muhammad used by the Muslims during at least so he was called by the historians. Yeah, and their book is called the Quran, correct. Freethinker, yes, the KKK's book is called the Quran as opposed to the Quran, and the original symbol is the crescent and star. So, Tony very well said the Al Ku Klux Klan. Yeah, man. Yeah, yeah. I see the Shriners with their Muslim moon symbol. Yeah, the Shriners, of course. Don't forget the Shriners with their Muslim symbol. The Shriners are a higher level of Freemason, and of course Baphomet. We'll get into that, but it's on my channel. I've discussed it many times. Um, of course, Baphomet is a man with boobies, and this little medical symbol here in many of the drawings, it's replaced with an appendage typically found roughly in this position with a guy. So you can think for yourself what this represents here. Um, so yeah, this also has a link to Islam. So we'll be talking about that. Okay, let me get that out the way. Okay, so there's a couple of other things I've been working on. So I will be releasing this next week, and it's a discussion on the Gnostic Gospels. I'll be doing a brief discussion on Gnostic Gospels because I'll be doing a lot of work, I think, on Gnosticism. I have on Thaddeus's channel. We'll do that on mine. But just so you know, this is very interesting. Within the Gospel of Thomas, for instance, which is 114 verses, just like the Quran is 114 surahs. Notice it says here, Simon Peter said to them, "Let Mary go forth from among us, for women are not worthy of life." Many Gnostics had a very low negative opinion of women. And Jesus said, "Behold, I shall lead her, that I may make her male, in order that she also may become a living spirit like you males." Because you see, women are not living spirits. They're not good enough. They're not as good as men. They may be worth half the value of a man. I don't know where that idea could come from. For every woman who makes herself male shall enter into the kingdom of heaven. So let's just say there's always the possibility that some of let's just say the trans Confucianism that's going on these days seems to be linked to Gnosticism. Yes, Tony, correct. So, yeah. And yeah, and there's a couple of other things here that you might find interesting. For instance, and also I will be doing a talk which relates to Bart Ehrman. So Bart Ehrman has many ideas. He speaks of many Christianities. Okay, he doesn't just speak of Christianity. He says, in the beginning there were many Christianities, as in, there was all of these essentially contradictory ideas, but they're all equally valid. Of course, 1 + 1 is equal to 5, 7, 2.5, 3/4, 12, 1, 2, 7, and 8. And these are all valid maths, right? Of course. Thanks, Bart. Appreciate it. So basically, Bart did not originate these ideas. Bart got these ideas from a scholar called Werner Bauer. And this is called the Bauer thesis. And I want to be talking about this because for a scholar with the intelligence of Bart Ehrman, or the supposed intelligence of Bart Ehrman, to take Gnostic ideas that are utterly contradictory and in many cases, I mean, clearly ahistorical and just fantasy, to take them seriously is a joke. So I've worked on that. For instance, let's have a look at this here. So, for instance, there's a common Gnostic text called the Gospel of Philip. Now, it's not written by Philip, but he's the only disciple mentioned in it. So it was named after him. Of course, they're not going to call it the Gospel of Bob, because who's Bob? Who cares? But, Gospel of James, Gospel of Peter, Gospel of Mary, of course, people will pay attention. You name it after someone famous. So what you have is, now, this Gospel of Philip was used by Dan Brown's book, The Da Vinci Code, as evidence, quote unquote, of Jesus' relationship with Mary Magdalene. Notice, however, the text does not state that Jesus was married to Mary or even romantically involved. The section referring to their relationship is heavily damaged and doesn't imply anything beyond a friendly relationship. These original Gospels, the original Gospel of Philip is dated to the 3rd century at the earliest, at least 200 years after Jesus' death. And its best use is for learning a little bit about crazy Gnostic ideas and some history, right? And fiction. So yeah, so I'll be talking about that. I'll be doing this next week. And then beyond that, I've been working on something else. So I've been working on the early church. As you know, the early church was founded, the church was founded by a guy called Martin Luther. And the early church was originally Baptist. And you know that I'm obviously just being sarcastic there. So this is a discussion. I've been doing some work on the early church, so these are some of my notes on that. And of course, I have some notes in here that is bound to annoy people. So yeah, so this is something I'm working on. I'll have this out very shortly as well. So this is ready. And I've got some other stuff on, as I've said to you before, I have some stuff on Ethiopia, the development of the Bible canon, and some of the early church councils. So this is something I'll be talking about as well. And of course, the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church and the influence of Ethiopia. So these are things that I need to be discussing at some point. So yeah, hopefully I'll get around to that within the next couple of weeks. Okay, so let me start with this. This is what you guys all came here for tonight. Welcome, Dragon. Welcome. Okay, Sergeant Grinch, yeah. And thank you for being here. Let's see. Is that a picture of a catacomb, an underground Christian place of worship? Correct. That is true, because they had to hide in these catacombs, of course, because of the risk to them, as they were plotting to take over the world and become a theocracy, so they could kill everyone they didn't like, according to certain people. Okay, so yeah, so guys, we ended off roughly around here last time. So I usually try to go back 1 or 2 slides. Welcome, Daro. So I usually like to go back a couple of slides so that I can just recap where I was before. Okay, so let me see prior to this. Where was I? Okay, so Mo dies, thankfully, except his legacy continues. And this is supposedly where Uthman finalizes the Quran. Falas, welcome. So, and of course, if you read the scholarship, it seems that Abd al-Malik was the guy who finalized the Quran, not Uthman. Uthman may have created a version of the Quran, but certainly was not the guy capable of making at that time, such a broadly applicable Quran, because he didn't have the government infrastructure to round up all the errant Qurans and then force everyone to adopt a new one. This did happen under Abd al-Malik. So anyway, but Jay's the guy to listen to. Jay and Mel are the 2 guys to chat to about that particular story. So even Elaine Pagels admits the Gospel of Philip was written by a Valentinian teacher, in other words, from Valentinus. Exactly. And yeah, Elaine Pagels, I mean, yeah, yeah, whatever. She and Bart. So I'll be talking about some of their crazy beliefs because, I mean, I think Bart's painted himself into a corner. I think he's left himself wide open to severe criticism for going with the Bauer thesis. I mean, the Bauer thesis is clearly flawed. Anyhow, so so the Quran is supposedly finalized as a written text under Uthman, right? Roughly the period 644 to 656. Now, the Hadith and the Sunnah remain oral traditions. Now, at the end of this, when I get to the last two slides, I'll be showing a timeline so you can have an actual idea of just how big the gaps are, because Muslims criticize Christianity for being written 4,000 years after Jesus died, right? And for their traditions being written on tape, flash drive, and 4K video about 10 minutes after Muhammad passed on. So, but we can have a look at that and see how much water that idea holds. Welcome, AOC. Okay, so Bruce 6, thank you. Yes, hit the like button if you like this. Hit the like, tell your friends, subscribe. And if you don't like it, hit the like button, dislike button twice. Okay, so the Hadith and the Sunnah remain oral traditions. The Quran, Hadith, and Sunnah are understood to have a purpose. Well, we're not entirely sure because the Sunnah seems to be just nice little bedtime stories about Muhammad and his companions, but it doesn't have the weight that it gathers under Shafi in the 9th century. Now, here you've got the beginnings of the Sharia, right? Where this is the word of Allah, the word of Muhammad, and these are not gathered as revealed law, revealed instructions. Then you've got the fiqh, which is the exegesis of this to create man's understanding and application of this and to create a corpus, a body of law. Ijtihad is the reasoning process used to derive the fiqh. And then personal reasoning and interpretation of the Rashidun, these are the rightly guided caliphs, hold authority. Rashid means orthodox or rightly guided. This is a name assigned to the first 4 caliphs. Now, again, Jay is the guy to watch on this, Jay Smith. I mean, he's really dug into this very deeply. So notice, though, that Muslims try to claim there's no orthodoxy. But notice the word Rashid and Rashidun, right, from the early Muslims, they are orthodox. This is the orthodoxy. And of course, the word Khalifa, now, there's other meanings to the word Khalifa as well, which have to do with magic and the occult. But Caliph as a title after the first 4 caliphs, Khulafa al-Rashidun. So these are the first 4 caliphs, and they are the ones who passed on the orthodoxy. Let's continue. So now the Umayyad, 661 to 750. Okay, this is where Uthman supposedly finalizes the Quran. Right. Then you've got the Rashidun period, which, ends roughly here, in 750, round about here. Okay, so the Umayyads established the foundations of Islamic law under their qadis or judges. They judge according to sound opinion, right? And Ray, which is basically reasoning, customary norms, which would be regional customary norms, and the letter and the spirit of the Quran, right? We could go to this one, the Encyclopedia of Islam. So let's actually open that up. Let's just see if there's anything else that I've missed there that just might be important. Okay, so let me bring that up. Close that. Let's see what I need. 926888B. Okay, 888 side B. So this is fiqh. Let's have a look here. Let me just go back to you guys. Okay, so this is the fiqh. Okay, in the Encyclopedia of Islam, it's spelled with KH. Obviously, elsewhere we see QH, but notice here, Arab customary law, as modified and completed by the Quran, survived to a considerable extent, but the Muslims did not hesitate to adopt the legal, commercial, and administrative institutions and practices of the conquered territories. They were absorbing legal ideas, they were absorbing customs from the people they conquered, right? And of course, they were then incorporating that into the Sharia. That's why it's a little bit of everything for everybody, right? So it's not purely an Arab system, it's derived from everything and everyone around them. And of course, one of the tenets of the Sharia, as I've discussed in the past, is that custom becomes law, right? Custom has the weight of law. So in other words, if a custom is absorbed by the Muslims, that custom, even if it violates the Sharia, violates the Quran, has the weight of law. Take, for instance, bachabazi, right, which is legalized gay sex, kiddie sex in Islam, right? Carol B says, yesterday I listened to a YouTube video on magic in Mesopotamian archaeology with a wonderful looking professor named Irving Finkel. Very interesting, and I plan to watch more of it. Okay, that's interesting because that probably made its way into Islam to some degree. Gabriel, yeah, I understand you guys aren't getting Deduza. Welcome. Understand you guys are not getting notifications. Yeah, like with Thaddeus, I don't get notifications either. It's just crazy. Um, so I subscribe or unsubscribe to his channel. I don't get notifications. It's like, yeah, YouTube. Okay, let's have a look and see what else was of interest here. Right, from the first decades of the 8th century onwards, however, it began to be projected backwards. So now what they're saying is here, notice, even in the Encyclopedia of Islam, they mention, originally, the living tradition of the ancient schools was anonymous. It was the average opinion of their representatives that counted, and not the individual doctrines of the most prominent scholars. That's a really interesting point. But from the first decades of the 8th century, the 2nd century of Islam onwards, it began to be projected backwards. So in other words, doctrines that were rising new under the Umayyads and under the Abbasids were now being projected backwards to the first days of Islam. They were suddenly claiming, but hold on, this major scholar did this. This major scholar did that. This major scholar did the following. So therefore, they were trying to appeal to authority to make their new ideas they were obviously creating, modern ideas they were creating. They were redacting it back into the past. And Jay Smith has spoken about this at length. So yes, this is admitted within the Encyclopedia of Islam. They provide an example here on that. Okay, so let's have a look here. They speak of differences between them were caused in the first place by geographical factors such as local variations in social conditions, customary law, and practice, but they were not based on any noticeable disagreement on principles or methods. So these are the ancient schools of law, right? So there were differences due to geography, local variations in social conditions, customary law, and practice. But notice they were not based on any noticeable disagreement on principles or methods. So again, we've got confirmation. Anela, welcome. Right? So they're telling us here that these 4 schools of fiqh are pretty much the same. Right? And then notice this last one here. At the same time at which the doctrine of the school of Kufa was retrospectively attributed to Ibrahim al-Nakhai, right? So again, you've got a school that is creating a new corpus of law, a new body of law, but now they're claiming, hold on, but this goes back to it's like me saying, well, I didn't just make this up. Einstein used to eat this pudding as well, and therefore you have to buy this pudding too, because this is Einstein's pudding. Legit, Einstein used to eat this, and it made Einstein very smart. Einstein invented the theory of relativity while he was eating this pudding, and therefore you should have this pudding that I just made, right? That I just invented, and I'm selling it for $50 a box. You need to buy this because Einstein used to eat this, First time on the market, never sold before, but Einstein had it. That's exactly what they were doing, right? Notice Kufa is not in Arabia. Kufa is in Iraq, right? So we'll continue anyway. So a similar body of doctrine was directly connected with the very beginnings of Islam in Kufa by being attributed to Ibn Masud. So suddenly these scholars were starting to redact everything to not only a different time, but a different geography. They were saying, hold on, this is not new. This actually belongs in the past, in a completely different place. This is what the early scholars of Islam did. So Tony says, wow, this is Islam as we know it was actually developed later on. Yes, Tony, yes, that's a very, James, yes, that's an excellent point. Yes, it was redacted backwards. We know that at least some of it was, right? And who had become, so this was attributed to Ibn Masud, a companion of the Prophet who had come to live in that city, and Ibrahim Nakhai became the main transmitter of that body of doctrine. In the same way, another companion of the Prophet, Ibn Abbas, became the eponym of the school of Mecca. And the school of Medina claimed as its main authorities. So the school of Mecca was saying, well, we derive from Ibn Abbas, and the school of Medina claimed as its main authorities among the companions of the Prophet, the Caliph Umar, and his son, Abdullah bin Umar. One further step in the search for a solid theoretical foundation of the doctrine of the ancient schools was taken in Iraq. Iraq, okay, odd. Very early in the 2nd century of Islam by transferring the term Sunnah of the Prophet from its political and theological into a legal context and identifying it with the Sunnah, the ideal practice of the local community, and the corresponding doctrine of its scholars. So, yeah, take a moment when you have to read through this, work it out for yourself. But what you do have is these guys are trying to take what they are creating, what they're developing, their version of the Talmud, right? Effectively creating a Talmud out of the Quran and redacting it back and putting it in the authority of people that probably have nothing or little to do with this. But notice the Sunnah here is political, theological, and legal. It states here that Sunnah is political, theological, and legal. It is a theocratic system. Right? Okay, so I'll skip that. We'll move on to the next thing. So hopefully that was interesting. And all right. So two schools emerge. The people of the Hadith, the revelationists. This is the revealed sources, right? And of course, the Hadith at that time were not considered legal documents. They eventually became legal documents. They became legally authoritative in Mecca and Medina. Textual authority was held as more important than personal opinion. And the rationalists, the people who believed that personal opinion and reason was important, were in Kufa and Basra, Iraq. So you had two schools. You had the revelationists, the strict literalists in Arabia, in the south, and in the northeast, you had these people who want to talk about reason, and now you've got two schools. There's a division, and somehow these have to be harmonized, right? This conflict has to be harmonized, and Shafi is the guy who starts that process. He said, according to what they're able. Sorry, let me go back here. Oh, sorry, no, wrong thing. Just go back a couple of minutes and just rewatch it at speed. So, AOC is a native Arabic speaking Christian. You can ask him questions on the Arabic. Cool. Yeah, I don't know if I'll have questions right now, but it is always very, very useful, in the future if I, Okay, hold on. So let me continue. Then you've got informed opinion, ijtihad, in the absence of clear textual authority. So now, when you don't have a clear instruction, right? When you don't have a clear instruction within the sources, the Quran, the Hadiths, and the Sunnah, the Sirah basically, then informed opinion. So there had to be exegesis. Now remember, the exegesis of the Sharia took about 800 to 900 years. The elder, welcome. Okay, now, so what happens in this period? The Arabs conquer Mesopotamia, Syria, and Palestine, right, between 633 and 51 AD. Jerusalem and Ctesiphon fall by 638. This would be in Iraq, right? The Persian Empire had a centuries-old tradition of formal lawmaking and jurisprudence. So this would have been absorbed into their thinking as well. Material influences causing changes in the doctrine of other Islamic law schools continue to proceed almost exclusively from the law schools of Iraq. So that's from Joseph Schacht. He concluded with Goldziher that Mohammedan jurisprudence originated in Iraq. Let's have a look at that. So basically, this jurisprudence originated in Iraq, right? This is up here, right? So instead of here in this region, it originated here. I mean, what is that distance? Let's just have a look. Let's go from here. So 1,500 kilometers away. Let's have it in miles. So nearly 1,000 miles away. So 1,000 miles away, you had this being developed outside. So Islamic jurisprudence, the whole basis of the theocratic legal system, was not here, was being developed here, right, in Iraq. Okay, so next thing. So from Persia to Plato. So most of the leading Sunni Imams were Persian. Okay, they were all based in this region. So Hanifa, Nisai, Tirmidhi, Bukhari, Muslim, Ibn Majah, Al-Ghazali, Ibn Sina, and also Al-Farabi, right? These guys are Persian. These guys are based out here, up in northern Babylonia, Turkey, and this region. They were not Arabian. So Islam has very strong influences from outside of this, okay, this region, the Arabian Peninsula. The elders, non-profit organization, yeah. Now to the Hanafis, okay, 699 to 767. So this school is founded by Abu Hanifa. Oh, by the way, I should mention Al-Farabi is very important, and I have mentioned this before, Plato. So as they were becoming a massive empire, a large empire, right, they needed to find a structure to base the caliphate on. I mean, how do you take a bunch of goat herders and suddenly have them run a major world empire? Well, you go to Plato's The Republic, and you use his ideas to create this massive empire. So basically, Al-Farabi was the scholar who was a very important scholar within Islam you've almost never heard of, except obviously I've spoken about him a few times. So what happens is they take his ideas, but he absorbs his ideas through the Neoplatonists. This also makes its way into Islam, right? And so he absorbs these ideas through the Neoplatonists. And the Neoplatonists are also very, very important. Yes, it is in Islamic thinking. It's also in the thinking of Arius. Okay, so actually, while I'm at this, let me do something else. Yes. So yes, while I'm at this, let me talk about something else I'm going to do because I've finished a whole bunch. I've been also a bit busy working on a whole bunch of different presentations. So this is one in Arius. So I'm trying to do presentations that are shorter, not 150 slides, but like 15, 20 slides, and to make several little presentations. And this is about Arius. And Arius, Arius, okay, Arianism, few people realize is polytheistic. Muslims always accuse Christians of being polytheistic. And of course, Muslims have the same idea as Arius, that Jesus was a created being. But I'm going to go into much detail about Arius. Okay, it's polytheistic, but also it is Neoplatonic. Okay, Arianism is Neoplatonic. He was a strict Neoplatonist. And so this is very interesting. So I need to talk about this in the future. And Al-Farabi incorporates these ideas into his thinking, right? Thank you, AOC. Much appreciated. Yeah. So I need to do a talk about Al-Farabi one day in the future, but I will be talking about that. I'll be touching on these things. Um, so he takes these ideas from Plato, and they start to using Plato's Republic to make the idea of the caliphate. Okay. So the Umayyads established the foundations of Islamic law under their qadis, judging according to sound opinion. Okay, I think I've done this before, so hold on. No, wrong one. I need to go. Let's close that. Sorry, moving on. So the Hanafis, founded by Abu Hanifa al-Numan ibn Thabit, the greatest Imam, supposedly born 80 AD in Kufa, Iraq, not in Arabia. He was a rationalist, right? He took his ideas from the Quran, the Hadith, and Ijtihad. So this is reasoning, personal reasoning, right? His school has influence in, his members are common in Turkey, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Jordan, and Lebanon. Of course, this is the largest of the 4 schools of jurisprudence. So, has decided court cases in the majority of Islamic lands for the greater part of Islam's history, including Abbasid and Ottoman periods, maintains preeminence in Islamic courts today. It's the largest system of fiqh, right? The first to analyze Islamic jurisprudence, to divide it into subjects, distinguish its issues, and determine the range and criteria for analogical reasoning or qiyas therein. So he was formative. He was very important. So these 4 imams, of course, are formative and key to the development of Islamic law and the thinking that went into it. Now, Shafi said about Hanafi, in jurisprudence, all scholars are the children of Abu Hanifa. Right. Of course, Shafi at the end of the day sort of becomes more important than him because Shafi has a critical role in the development of the fiqh. Now, Ray, assuming I haven't mispronounced it, personal opinion in law, the decision of a legal point by one's own judgment in the absence or ignorance of a traditional ruling bearing on the case in question. Now, you had the revealed sources, the Quran. What if the Quran doesn't talk about a particular situation? What if there's no answer in the Quran on a given situation you're facing? Well, then you have to use personal judgment. And the fact that the Encyclopedia of Islam speaks at length about the use of personal judgment means that the Quran is also incomplete. Now, although for an opinion on a specific question of law, qawl is most commonly used, okay? Actually, I have not seen that before. I need to look up what this qawl is. Let's have a look. Give me a second. I'm going to try and bring up what is this qawl, K-A-W. Oh, I'm going to have a look here on the Brill. Okay, so I'm going to go to the Encyclopedia of Islam, volume 13. Give me a sec. Now, that is really interesting. Okay, very interesting. It says here in, okay. No, this doesn't make any sense here. If anyone knows what qawl is, this would be very, very helpful from you. But let's have a look in the encyclopedia. Actually, let me go back here. Qawl being, okay, hold on. Let me go back. I'm going to try and find this on the K. It should definitely be in this. It will be here. So let's have a look for what this qawl is. Qawl al-Haq. Okay. Sure would, an obscure expression. It's not a look. Bring of Baraka, Qawl al-Haq. Okay, volume 934. Okay, it's in the Quran. 1934. Fascinating. Okay, but I don't have time to go there. Certain word. Affirmation by the tongue. Okay. In its definition of faith, the Hanbali line insists upon affirmation by the tongue and by deeds amal. Okay, so affirmation by the tongue, a sure word. Okay, so basically someone giving you their word. Okay, so this is the word of Muhammad. So the word, yeah, to present views since he's okay, okay, fine. That's right. Okay, something interesting. But so in theology, Ray is adherence to a body of theological doctrine. Right. Hanif, Hunafa, in Islamic writings, one who follows the original and true monotheistic religion. In the Quran, Hanif is used especially of Abraham. Islamic usage usually uses Hanif as the equivalent of a Muslim, upright. So look, you've got context here of upright, but Hanifan, also refers to the original religion of Abraham. Now, I must tell you that Abraham was Hanifan, Allah is Hanifan, but Muslims reject Judaism and Christianity, and they claim that Abraham was never a Jew. Right? He did not follow Yahwism. Abraham had a different religion before he turned to Yahweh. He, of course, according to the Jewish scholars, was a Sabaean, which would be a Yemeni Sabaean, and he worshipped the same religion as that. He followed the same religion as that of Mesopotamia, Babylon, right? So I covered that in great length in monotheism, right? My monotheism series. So Muslims are following the religion of Abraham. So this is Abraham before he turned to Yahweh. So they reject his conversion in the Bible. Let's have a look here. My favorite author. So my favorite author. I like Alston Trevor, British novelist. This guy, Alston Trevor. You'd know him probably from The Flight of the Phoenix. Okay, but to be honest, if I had to choose, he also writes as Adam Hall, and he writes a series called Quiller. Oh, bugger. He writes the Quiller novels. Quiller is a fictional character, so yeah, he writes as Adam Hall and Quiller novels, and these are the Quiller novels. So yeah, these are probably my favorites. Just so you know, QWERTY. Okay, right. Anywho, so that's the difference. So when Muslims say they are in the line of Abraham, they reject Christianity and Judaism because they claim that Abraham rejected Judaism and Abraham would reject Christianity. Abraham was a follower of a different religion, and we know what that religion was, and it was pagan. Okay. Then you get the Malikis. The Malikis from 715 to 795. There is their developmental period. Founded by Malik ibn Anas ibn Malik Abu Abdullah al-Asbai al-Himyari. Himyar, fascinating. Where is Himyar? Well, Himyar is down here in Yemen. What was the religion of these Yemenis? What was the religion? Well, it was exactly the same religion as here in Babylon. Right? What do they claim that Abraham worshipped? Well, the same religion as this in Babylon. Of course, we know that Abraham was up here in Turkey, okay, Sanliurfa, in Haran, right? And what was that religion? Well, it's the same as the one in Babylon. So keep these things in mind. Himyari is down here, right, in Yemen. So these are all the same. Hence the Greek word Malakia. What does that mean, Malakia? I'm curious about what that means. So, because man, sometimes you guys give me information that's really, really useful. Malakia, I don't see it, but sin. That is very, very interesting, Nicodemus Serpico. That is really interesting. Sin. Okay. Okay, moving on from that. Right. He's the scholar of Medina. He was born in Medina in the year 93 AH or 712 AD. Right. So he is in Reliance. If you have a copy of the Reliance of the Traveler, please check the description, download a copy, see page 1086. Usually when I give a page reference, it is not to the page number in the book itself, as in this page number here. It's usually not a reference to the page number as you see it here. It's usually a reference to the page number up here within the PDF, okay? That's usually what I mean on the PDF. Okay, he was a traditionist, so he was like a literal reader of the Quran and stuff and said, yeah, okay, that's literally true. Based on Quran, Hadith, with minimal reasoning, minimal ijtihad, just do what the book says, basically. His beliefs are common in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, Egypt, Sudan, Bahrain, and Kuwait. He did not mount his horse within the confines of Medina out of reverence for the ground that enclosed the Prophet's body. Okay, fine. Did anyone do that for Moses? Anyone know? They would not relate to hadith without first performing ablution. Would not relate. I'm going to call poop on that, but fine. It's a great story. It sounds fantastic. Wonderful propaganda. And he wrote the Al-Muwatta, the Trodden Path, the greatest hadith collection of its day, although not today. Almost all accepted by Bukhari. And Shafi said, after the Book of Allah, no book has appeared on earth that is sounder than Malik's. Okay, so these guys, it's a mutual admiration society going on here. He died in about the year 795. Let's continue. The Abbasids, roughly 750 to 950. So, all the hadith and sunnah were collated during the 8th to 9th century. Zahar, but the hadiths came in sometime in late 800 AD. How can he quote hadiths? And he wrote his own. he wrote his own. So, yeah, we'll look. When did Islam ever make sense, Zahar? When did Islam ever make sense? Again, if you guys enjoy what I do, if you enjoy the work that I put out, please just do like, share, subscribe, and so on. Yeah, I said, as you've seen, I've shown you now, like, I think 4 different PowerPoint presentations of work that I finished that I just need to present. I've got to find some time to just put it on the calendar and do it. Sunday, I'll come online again. And yeah, so yeah, fiqh and ijtihad become a structured disciplines. Okay, so now over time, about a century after Muhammad's death, right, roughly 120 years, the fiqh is becoming a structured discipline, a formal body of knowledge. So this is over 100 years later that's starting to develop. Schools of Islamic legal thought emerge with state support. So now this theocratic system is developing with state support. The state is paying these people to develop this nonsense. Right? Debates are ongoing. Lots of disagreements went on for hundreds of years. These disagreements went on till the 12th century. Okay, they were killing each other over this stuff. Students joined to learn and develop each madhab. Notice a school of fiqh is a school of jurisprudence, but a madhab technically would translate as a school of persuasion. Right? A madhab is a school of persuasion. In other words, these 4 scholars were the most persuasive. They were the most compelling in terms of their ability to change people's minds. Tony says, I saw IC's video about it earlier than that, but it was yesterday at the Reddit on Islamic sources. So the hadiths we know, Bukhari, Muslim, are supposed to be collections of earlier hadith. In theory, yeah, Villainous, welcome. Okay, so the 4 main schools emerge in this period, 750 to 950, your 4 main schools emerge. Now notice, as I said, there's a split. You've got Mecca, Medina, you've got Basra and Baghdad, and you've got Kufa around here somewhere as well. So you've got this divide into this Persian, Iranian sort of region, okay, because there was a lot of Persian influence here, right? So you've got this influence here, and you've got these guys down here. And there's a divide between them, and this divide has to be bridged somehow. Okay, briefly, the ideal state, Plato's Republic. So Islamic Platonism. After Aristotle, okay, called the Al-Falasuf, the philosopher, Plato is the most important philosophical authority of the non-Arab tradition. Islamic Platonism relies on mostly Hellenistic paraphrases or commentaries on Plato, as well as non-canonical writings apocrypha that are not extant today in the Greek original. So notice, just like the Bible, just like the Muslims don't quote the Orthodox Bible, they quote apocryphal sources, they quote Gnostic sources, they quote heretical sources. By the same tradition, they use paraphrases or commentaries on Plato, not the original Plato as such, and non-canonical writings. In the cultural centers of the Near East, beginning with the time of the Abbasids, schools of translators and philosophers formed. Best known representatives are translator Al-Kindi, who died in 870, and Islamic philosopher Al-Farabi, who died in 950. Al-Farabi was the first important Islamic Platonist. He attempted to reconcile Platonism and Aristotelianism. Neoplatonic intellectual material penetrated Islamic philosophy, especially through its reception of Aristotle. Neoplatonic commentaries on Aristotle, for example, Porphyry, played an important role. Now, I believe Porphyry was a student of Plotinus, if I'm correct. I could be wrong here, but I believe he was a student of Plotinus, and he hated Christianity. So this, of course, would have crept its way into Islam if they were taking these ideas. So there's also a problem. So let's see, Zahar says there's a problem here, also by Sahib. This tradition calls out all these scholars from Medina, but none of these scholars were quoted in the collection. Interesting. And then Villainous says the 7 sleepers is based on a Platonic theory on what happens when you sleep. That is very, very interesting. So yeah, we need to bear this in mind. This is much deeper and more important than we realize, but it's not discussed by scholars, which is really odd. I had to go look all this up. It's the odd thing is all of this information is in the scholarly materials, but they don't seem to make the obvious conclusions. The scholars just won't say the obvious thing. And the Duza says, yeah, the ultimate recycle religion, recycle all the apocrypha. Exactly. It's a washing machine for the apocrypha. It's crazy. A well-known representative for this is Ibn Sina. Avicenna died in 1037. But Plato himself, received mainly through the lens of Neoplatonism, became significant for numerous schools of philosophy. For example, that of the Ikhwan as-Safa, the Brothers of Integrity, in 10th century Baghdad, and for the Islamic Gnosis. Okay, so there's obviously now I haven't done a thorough. I'm just presenting this. This is what I found. Here you go. But understand, there's this wealth of information that has been completely and utterly ignored by scholars. Yeah, they'll write about it, but they don't make the obvious conclusions about it. This information is all sitting in silos and just doesn't get connected. They refuse to connect those last few dots. And Freethinker says the mosques have a lot of geometric art influenced by the oneness of Neoplatonism. I think you may well be correct there. Yes, makes sense. They're art, they're geometric art. So yeah, we're gonna have a look at this as to how the concept of Allah came about. Now, Al-Farabi, 870 to 950, Aristotelian Platonic philosopher, he profits from the activity of translation in Baghdad. Building on Plato's Politeia, or the Republic, he sketches out the ideal state, the perfect state, the caliphate, right? He gets it from Plato. Al-Farabi's Greek heritage is visible on the most basic conceptual level. A society, on his account, is an association of human beings collaborating to preserve themselves and to attain their highest perfections. In the Perfect State, Volume 5, okay, blah, blah, blah. Check that out later. Without collaboration, man cannot attain the perfection for the sake of which his inborn nature or fitra has been given to him. In function of this size, associations can or cannot furnish the basis for a perfect society. So Plato basically says a city-state that's too small cannot do what he needs it to do to become a perfect society. You need something larger, something bigger, much bigger. Okay, so in function of this size, associations can or cannot furnish the basis for a perfect society, or Kamil. Now, don't forget, Muhammad was the Insan al-Kamil. Okay, let me just grab this over here. So Momo was the Insan al-Kamil, the perfect man, the perfected man. Right? This idea has made its way into multiple philosophies. Like, if you look at the Nazis, had the Übermensch, right? The Nazis had the Übermensch, right? The Overman, the Übermensch. Then, of course, you had the perfect Soviet man and woman, and so on. And this is something that all these scholars aspire to become perfect, like Muhammad, right? Perfected, right? Just like the Gnostics. And I always considered, yes, Zachar says, yes, Freethinker. I always wondered why. I thought this was because of the Persian influence. However, the Persians were Neoplatonists, I assume. We need to look into this. Now here, look, I don't have time to dig every hole, to run down every rabbit hole, but there is too much information here that says, look, there's something going on here that is not within the standard narrative. There are borrowings, there are copies, there are outright plagiarisms. There are these clear indications of them using other ideas and incorporating it into Islam, calling it Islamic, and no one's talking about it. It's just so strange to me. Okay. And then, Zachar says, I just remembered that Greeks ruled Persia to Merv to India for over 400 years, and that could be why some of this stuff is in there. So there's a Persian influence and a Persian Greek influence. Thus, the smallest unit suited to harbor a perfect society is a city, a Medina. Smaller associations, such as villages, quarters, streets, and houses, are per se imperfect. Larger ones, like nations, and the union of all the societies in the habitable world, by contrast, are perfect. So notice the union of all the societies in the world. This is, of course, the Muslims have to take over the world. If they can make a union of all the societies in the inhabitable world, if they can create this worldwide caliphate under the Sharia, they can make a perfect world. So you understand? So this guy's ideas, this taken from Plato through the Neoplatonists, right? The same Neoplatonic nonsense that influenced Arius, okay, that influenced the heresy of Arius. This is also behind this heresy of Islam. Sounds socialistic. Yes, everybody under one thumb. The Duza, everyone under one thumb. What are you guys seeing in this so far? I mean, so as I said, if I if I branch off here, if I go off on a tangent and look into this, I'm sure I'm going to find a lot more. But does this sound like this is strictly something coming out of Arabia, out of Mecca, out of Muhammad's mouth? Because none of the other way when the truth rears its head. And I am going to have to agree with you, horse. I am going to have to agree with you. Too many scholars, clearly not every scholar, but man, enough of them. Built for Speed says, Dr. Francis A. Schaeffer has video that briefly covers that, called How Should We Then Live? The Age of Fragmentation. Okay, I think I've watched it. I think I've watched it some time ago. I can't remember much about it. I can remember nothing about it actually, but it's familiar. Okay, so yeah, so guys, I think there is something here. Okay, so this idea, now, if you read through Plato, if you read through even Aristotle, and you look at their ideas of the perfect society, how to construct the perfect political system, you will find that they have some pretty horrific ideas, and we only hear the nice things about them. Like, oh, Plato was a wonderful guy, walked on water, glowed in the dark, all of these wonderful things. When he walked past babies, they would grow 3 inches taller overnight, stuff like that. You hear this about Plato and about Aristotle, but you don't hear about the fact that they were terrible totalitarians. Plato and Aristotle had some horrible ideas that we would consider repulsive today, that we would consider utterly oppressive and totalitarian, dictatorial. So there are issues here, and these ideas have made their way into Islam. Nicodemus Serpico says, it kills me how so many have intrinsically adopted a Boolean Aristotelian logic approach to how they'll fill the void. If one thing isn't true, then the opposite must be true, which is how Muslims argue. Actually, that's fairly true. Yeah, Muslim argumentation is called Adab al-Jadal. It's a bunch of nonsense. Okay, moving on. Al-Farabi. The word theology appears for the first time with Plato in the Politeia and denotes myths. Okay, fascinating. That's from the Brill Dictionary of Religion. They had to learn everything from the pre-Socratic teachings to the writings and commentaries of Proclus and John Philoponus. Okay, this is written by John of Alexandria, 490, who lived... Okay, sorry, John Philoponus. John Philoponus was known as John of Alexandria. Anything in purple generally leads towards heresy or Gnosticism. Okay, anything that's in green, I'm talking about Islam, right? If the text is in green, it generally leans towards Islam. If it's in this brownish orange, then generally I'm talking about like sort of heresy of some sort, or paganism. Okay, when it's in purple, it's generally leaning towards heresy / Gnosticism. Okay, so the brownish is generally paganism, the purplish is generally Gnosticism. Just so you know the color scheme that I'm using. So John Philoponus, John of Alexandria, he lived 490 to 570. He is basically the guy credited with tritheism, that the Godhead is 3 separate gods. You might have heard of a guy called female chick called John Wick. Okay, good old John Wick. John Wick, I'm convinced, is female, and constantly says that we have 3 gods. Now, also Arius, oddly enough, made the claim. Arius would make the claim that Orthodox Christians were polytheists, that they had 3 separate gods, and this is all the result of his ideas that were influenced by this Neoplatonic concept. Okay, so John Philoponus, he's a guy that spread this idea in Arabia, oddly enough, and so yeah, there's a story around him as well. Okay, now the proper founder of Neoplatonism was Ammonius Saccas of Alexandria, who was born of Christian parents but apostatized and he died in 243. His more distinguished pupil, Plotinus, also an Egyptian, developed the Neoplatonic ideas in systematic form and gave them firm foothold and wide currency, particularly in Rome, where he taught philosophy. The system was propagated by his pupil, Porphyry, that we mentioned Porphyry previously, of Tyre, who taught in Rome, and by Jamblichus of Chalcis in Syria, okay, and by Proclus of Constantinople. It supplanted the popular religion among the educated classes of later heathendom or paganism, and held its ground until the end of the 5th century, when it perished of its own internal falsehood and contradictions. That's from Schaff, History of the Christian Church, page 912. Now, of course, we need to look at Plotinus the One. So now that's a little bit about Neoplatonists. Actually, what was the father of, hang on, now I'm just suddenly thinking, who was the father of, who was the father of Arius? I need to have a look at this. Ammonius. Okay, so Arius's father was called Ammonius. Arius's father was called Ammonius. And we just had an Ammonius on this page. Did I see that right? The proper founder of Neoplatonism was Ammonius Saccas of Alexandria. I wonder if there's a connection. Ammonius, and Arius's father was called Ammonius. Can someone check to see if I've missed something here? Arius's father is called Ammonius, and you've got this founder of Neoplatonism was Ammonius Saccas of Alexandria. Just check and see if there's a connection there. I could be wrong. That's probably nothing. Okay, so Nicodemus says, funny how according to Western historians and mass media, Greek society, culture, religion, schools of thought ceased to exist for 2,000 years post the resurrection of Christ Jesus is dead. I'm not sure but not in the minds of media of the West. Oh, Zeus is dead. Yeah. yeah. Zeus is dead. Post the resurrection. Okay. Let me continue here because I want to finish this. So then you got Averroes. Okay. Medieval Latin, Averroes, also called Ibn Rushd. Arabic in full, Abu al-Walid Muhammad ibn Ahmad ibn Muhammad ibn Rushd. Okay. Born 1126, Cordoba, Spain, died 1198. And it says here, influential Islamic religious philosopher who integrated Islamic traditions with ancient Greek thought. So right location, Villainous, I know, but notice he integrated Islamic traditions with ancient Greek thought. Now, we're not talking about this, but the fact is they were taking from Greek thought. And so they were taking from these ideas, putting them into Islam, right? At the request of the Almohad Caliph, okay, he produced a series of summaries and commentaries on most of Aristotle's works, and on Plato's Republic, which exerted considerable influence in both the Islamic world and Europe. So notice they were taking Plato's Republic, right? So this is known, it's documented that this was happening. Now, Plato and the socialist saints. So, in legitimizing state socialism, Plato plays an inglorious role. Plato's politeia is aristocratic. It is led by the philosophers who are recruited from the warrior caste. Bulgakov has pointed out that the term philosophers in the context of the politeia can be translated as righteous or saints. So the philosophers, think of the Enlightenment era. Think of the Enlightenment philosophers. They are the righteous ones, the correct ones, the saints. Think of the imams. Plato designs an ideal state whose main purpose is the perfection of man, and that's exactly what the socialists wanted to do. That's exactly, we just spoke about the Insan al-Kamil, okay? And how they need to take over the whole world to make the world perfect, especially the human soul. One could say that Plato's state has a pastoral task, by which every state, of course, must evidently be overwhelmed. They have to take over every state. In addition, Plato held the opinion that the state can fulfill its pastoral task best within the framework of a state socialist form of organization. So welcome to Plato's construction of the communist totalitarian state. So understand there's a lot going on here this is the other side of Plato. I mean, there's a very dark, very negative side to Plato that is not discussed, because all they've got to do, as I said, is talk about how if Plato walked past you, you would smell fresh rose smells, and your acne would be cured, and babies would grow 3 inches tall overnight, and Plato could walk on water. That's the stuff we have to know about him, but you don't hear about the negative, very dark stuff about his philosophy and thinking. With respect to the emergence of Gnosticism as the foundation of chiastic socialism, Plato plays an inglorious role due to his undervaluation of all things material. After all, it was Platonic philosophical schools and Platonizing mystical circles that played a decisive part in the emergence of Gnosis in late antiquity. In this way, the socialist aspects of Platonism also found their way into Gnostic sects. This is why socialism has a Gnostic element. Gnosticism provides an alternative program to Christianity, diametrically opposed to Christianity. Gnosticism is not Christian-friendly. Nicodemus, you said, wow. Can I ask you why? What it is that made you say, wow? I'd be very curious to know. What are you guys thinking so far of all of this? What are your thoughts on this? I mean, this is a genuine political, historical element within Islam that I've never seen discussed anywhere. I've never seen this spoken about. Okay, so no connection with Arius, according to Prophet Google. Okay, now I think that makes sense to do so. But yeah, just the coincidence on the naming. Just the coincidence on the naming was Lloyd de Jong. The timing of Imam Hanifa and his fiqh doesn't make sense. Traditions say that his ancestors were Jats, an ethnic group in India, and Mutazilim doesn't start until mid-800. So look, I mean, Islam doesn't make sense at all. I mean, the histories are clearly a mess. I mean, obviously the history is a mess. I mean, this is what I have. So once you've put this story down, you start to look at everything else. You can start to work out how the dates must work. But I mean, clearly the Islamic narrative is not by any means believable. You know, so Nicodemus Serpico says the association of saintlyhood and philosophers. Yeah, yeah. I mean, so think Enlightenment, think the Enlightenment, think the atheist enlightened philosophers. That's exactly what you're getting here. They are the priests. And according to socialism, the scientists are the priests. And don't forget, scientists used to be called natural philosophers. So it's all a play on words, understand? So basically, you're looking at saint. If you look at what's the dude? These very famous physicists. Okay, so it's wherever they are, just put saint in front of their name. Right. Seraph says, I think Plato and secular reasoning is often not examined as opposing Christianity, which is really interesting. Yes, I did an entire series on socialism, which was quite literally designed as an anti-Christian religion. It was basically derived from Catholicism. So they took the whole structure of the Catholic Church, took the whole Catholic doctrine, stripped out anything of divinity, and called it Christian socialism, right? So the founder of formal socialism in the 1820s, right, he called his religion Christian socialism. Socialism was begun as an atheistic socialist religion, literally a replacement for Christianity based scientific Christianity. So yeah. Villainous says hooks into modern secular humanism. Note who they are bedfellows with. Exactly. I've said this when I did my series on socialism and humanism, schmuckular humanism. I've made these claims. So we need to dig deeper into Plato and some of his crazy ideas and the connections to the Muslims. Right? Okay, let me continue. So plagiarism from Plotinus. Okay, so 204 to 270. Plotinus was a pagan. His student Porphyry despised Christianity. His writings were widely read and accepted within Augustine of Hippo's time in the 5th century, over 200 years before Muhammad's first revelation. Al-Farabi may have borrowed more than just political ideas. Let's look at what else Al-Farabi, the scholar, may have borrowed. Do you remember the name of that video on Christian socialism? Yeah, it's made by a guy called Lloyd. I don't know if you've heard of him. There's a dude called Lloyd on YouTube. Hang on, let me have a look at him. There's a guy on YouTube. Oh, someone wrote Lloyd is an 8th census who hails from South Africa, now lives in Poland. Ha ha ha. Yeah, there's a guy on YouTube called Lloyd, and he has spoken about this Christian socialism. So if I go to my live talks here, because some of them also on Thaddeus's channel, all right? Here, Scientific Christianity, the Religion of Atheist Socialism. It's 2 shows here, these 2. Then of course here's an intro that I do. No, actually no, it's 1, 2, 3. My bad. 1, 2, 3. Here. Here's a shorter one, just a preview that I did with my group on my channel. And I also discuss some of it here. I talk about it over these. Death in the Name of Atheism, the Atheist Cult of Reason, where literally killing priests was government policy. It was actual government policy to murder priests who wouldn't leave Christianity. And then I've got Atheos, against God. It's a fairly lengthy section, but it's very detailed. And it's discussing atheism and just how ridiculous atheism actually is. And then, of course, schmuckular humanism, secular fundamentalism's man-made religion, discusses secular humanism, how it was literally explicitly founded as a religion. Okay, its founders called it a religion. So yeah, so Nicodemus, look up this guy called Lloyd on YouTube. I believe he's internet famous. Look him up, and you know, and if you don't like it, throw bananas at him, right? Because that's what you do. And if you like it, smash that like button. Okay, subscribe, tell people about it. Killing Christians who don't convert. Who does that? Yeah, Muslims did that, right? Oh, hang on, and so did the atheists. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, look, yes, horse, correct. I mean, there's the church is going off the rails again. Karl Marx was the father of religious liberalism. You know, Karl Marx, all of these crazy guys from the 1800s, all of these crazy whack jobs got their ideas from the philosophers of the Enlightenment era prior to the French Revolution. You're looking around 1750. So you're looking like the early to mid 1700s. All of these nonsense ideas flourished. Okay, this was this whole anti-Christian atheist movement, they all picture themselves as the return to Plato and the early Greeks. And I mean, if you read some of the early Greek ideas, these ideas are obviously just trash. But today they are presented as science, real science. Okay, this is 6th century Greek paganism, 5th century BC Greek paganism presented as the science. Literally, that's what atheists are opposing. Paganism dressed up as science. That's it. Okay, so anywho, in Porphyry's account, now this is very important, so make a note here. In Porphyry's account, the Vita Platoni, okay, Plotinus lived a divine life. See if this reminds you of anyone you know. He was more than an ordinary man. He had a divine nature. He possessed every possible virtue, the highest moral and spiritual standards, and his teachings were regarded as a legitimate continuation of the Platonic tradition. He was a paradigm of philosophical perfection. So does Plotinus remind you of anyone? You know? Does that sound vaguely familiar at all? This worship of a man by these followers? Don't know. Never heard of it. So every possible virtue. Very Christ-like, but also very Muhammad-like. Okay? So very Christ-like, certainly. They were trying to paint him as Christ, clearly. However, not only that, so clearly, look, don't forget, Porphyry hated Christianity. So Plotty Muhammad. So now, what else did Al-Farabi, like I said, what else did Al-Farabi borrow? They needed a template for Muhammad. Muhammad is clearly what's the word? I've used the word in the past, a grouping of different characteristics, but they needed a template to create the character of Muhammad. And it would seem that if Al-Farabi borrowed so much from the Greeks and borrowed so much from the Neoplatonists, then he may well have taken this as the template for creating the Muhammad that we all know. To him, phenomena were a poor image or mimicry, a mimesis of something higher and intelligible, which was the truer part of genuine being, and he refused to have his portrait painted. Hold on. Hang on. Do you guys know of any do you know of any religious leader that you can't paint his likeness? Does anyone know about anyone who's been fired, lost their job, or been killed because they painted a picture of a certain religious leader? Is that familiar? Is this picture becoming clearer? Yeah, so Tony, yes, you did. That's in the Sirah. That's in the Sirah, Drinking Muhammad's Blood. That's in the Sirah, the biographies of Mo. So guys, I mean, so now, taking his lead from his reading of Plato, Plotinus developed a spiritual cosmology involving 3 foundational elements: the one, the intelligence, and the soul. It is from the productive unity of these 3 beings that all existence emanates. The word emanates is very important here because that's what the monad does, the Gnostic monad. Augustine counted many of his thoughts and ideas in the city of God, on the city of God against the pagans, the civitate dei contra paganos. So now, Built for Speed says, Lloyd, was the point that they were so legalistic for the disliking of the Apostle Paul? There's definitely, I mean, these guys really, I mentioned previously that the dislike of Paul goes back to the 8th century. Like the founding, like the early century, the early decades of Islam already, they had it out for Paul. And there's this, I can't remember what the specific reason was, but I have traced it to where it started. I have traced the scholar who actually began it. And, but just ask the question again, just try to clarify it. I'm not quite sure I understand you. Built for Speed. So Tony says, and this just casts more doubt in the historicity of Muhammad. I'm not denying he existed, but clearly there's something fishy about his biography, and I would agree. Notice, there is no other religious leader that I've heard of that refused to have his portrait painted except a guy called Mo, and this dude. And Al-Farabi is intimately connected with this dude because he borrowed all of his stuff. Let's have a look what else was taken. Let's see if there's anything else that was borrowed. Plotinus, let's look at the one. So Plotinus had a concept of God, right? Of the supreme being called the one. And let's compare the one versus Allah, and you might find they're the same God. This is a high-level comparison covering aspects of the God Yahweh, okay? Plotinus is the one and Allah. Let's have a look. You've got the Christian God. You've got Plotinus is the one and Allah. They are all, in terms of sovereignty, they're all creators. Let's see what Tony says. The Baha'is apparently do not like having pictures of their prophet being shared around, but unlike some Muslims, they're pretty calm in regards to it. Oh, I did answer it. Okay, great. Thanks, Built to Speed. Okay. Is nature is a single being with a complex nature. That's the Christian view, right? A single substance, single essence with a complex nature. The one is a simple unity beyond being, and Allah is a simple unity based on pure will. But notice that this description applies to Allah as well. Muslims will use exactly the same description on Allah. Allah is beyond being, Allah is beyond understanding. We cannot understand Him. Action. God is intrinsic, extrinsic, and extrinsic. I'm not sure how we are to understand this, but basically the Holy Spirit, okay, God is within reach of you. God is within you, right? Whereas the one is extrinsic. It's the monad. It's outside because matter is evil, right? Matter is impure. This is a being of pure spirit. It is outside of the universe, as so is, it's outside of the world of matter. And so is Allah, extrinsic, right? Allah doesn't come to earth, right? So can He be known? Yes, through reason and faith, knowable only through complete submission. What does Islam mean? Submission. Inscrutable, cannot be known. These two are exactly the same. These are exactly the same. These are exactly the same. Believe it or not, these are identical. Man's nature is free, but Plotinus in Islam, you're the slave of Allah, and Plotinus, you're the slave of the one. The basis for obedience to God is love in the Christian religion, mysticism, and fear. Now, it's interesting that fear, because in the Sharia it says explicitly, Allah threatens those who do not listen to Him. Allah threatens those. He will threaten you. So fear is most certainly for the lower Muslims, but mysticism, and I've spoken about this at length, the higher levels of Muslims, the ones at the higher levels, the imams, the serious scholars, they approach Allah through the mysticism, through the occult. So this is an overlap, right? So you've got the two divisions here, the Haqiqah and the Sharia. The mysticism is the Haqiqah, here is the Sharia. Okay? The use of force to compel obedience. Man's will, man has free will. In the one, you must impose your will on another. And of course, under Islam, you must, with jihad, impose the Muslim's will on others. And predestination, right? Of course, I would assume that this applies in reverse as well. But notice, this applies to Islam as well. This applies to Islam, to Muslims, to Allah. So again, this is very strange. In man's purpose, to know the Creator. Under Plotinus' scheme, submit to the Creator and obey the Creator. In Islam, it's both. You must submit to and obey Allah. And finally, on the days of resurrection, yes in Christianity and yes to Allah. So this is Plotinus' version of God, right? These are all identical across the board up to here. What do you guys think of this? I mean, what are your thoughts in terms of this? Am I saying that this is identical and I'm clearly and obviously wrong? Or is there clearly 99% overlap here? Right. So, okay, let's go to Shafi, right? So give me your thoughts on this. Just drop me a thought. And of course, after this, if you can drop a comment, would of course be interesting to have your comments. So I'll go another 5 minutes, guys. I've gone 90 minutes. That's longer than I thought I would go. Okay, so let me Shafi, okay? 767 to 820. So we will dive, as we go through this presentation, we'll dive very deep into Shafi's life and relevant events as part of it, because he's the most important of the Imams we will be studying. So Seraph says definitely an overlap. Okay, so Shafi collects Hadith and Sunnah, right? Through him, fiqh and ijtihad become a structured formal discipline. Shafi raises Islamic legal thought to the status of a science, right? And then Shafi develops a framework to reconcile the rationalists and the traditionists. So he starts to reconcile North and South traditions. Now remember, within the all of the scholars are always looking north, okay? But clearly there were things happening in the south. So what you have is Shafi reconciles these two groups. Long enough for a Thaddeus. Oh, good God, no. I don't do 12-hour streams, man. Sorry about that. Okay, so look, I'm not going to do the serial lines A4.2, page 9, 27. Okay, so serial lines A4.2, page 9. Okay, and page 27, paragraphs 1 to 3. So, okay. You know what? I'm going to end this here. I'm not going to go any further but I'll leave you guys. This is homework. Okay, this is your homework. There will be a test. Okay, so have a look further for more information on the Reliance. Now, I will jump ahead quickly to just to show you guys something. Let's have a quick look at this timeline. Have a look here. Okay, this is the Umayyad dynasty. These are the Abbasids. Okay, Baghdad controls Islam over all of this period. This is Mecca. This is Damascus under the Umayyads. This is Baghdad. Okay, all the Quran commentaries are here. We're looking at often 900. The Hadith are compiled here around 900. The Hadith are created in this period. This is where Momo dies, 632. This is 600 here. This black line is 600. Momo dies in 632. Okay, so then all your variant readings occur here. Your Hadith is compiled here. Okay, Ibn Hisham, okay, he writes his first seerah around here. I mean, do you see how long after the death of Muhammad? This is right here. You have Abu Bakr, okay, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, right? He founds the Shi'as, basically. And then you've got all of this. Notice all of this. These guys controlled this for a long time, up to 1200, right? Then you've got all these Quran commentaries that occur here. You've got Tabari here, right? I mean, look at this. This is all Mo's here. And then all of this happens, okay, 600 years later. Okay. 15 minutes of Q&A in the future. But Zahar, I did Q&A through the whole session. I was taking questions and answering questions throughout the whole session. But yes, okay, fine. But then I have to do shorter shows because, man, hour and a half. But let me just check. I mean, I can do this, but I want to try and keep these kind of short. But yeah, I mean, but I do try and take questions as I go, right? So Nicodemus says, Zachar says, so much work involved some kind of willful subversion so that nobody could find the truth. Internet was not prophesied by Mo, exactly. And yeah, I mean, clearly there's something going on here. I mean, so this is, okay. So make a screenshot of this if it helps, and I can put out the original. There'll be a test, yes. And then, of course, Nicodemus says, my blind faith perspective is that all stem from Judeo-Christian beliefs. And the further you get away from truth throughout time and space, the more deviant those beliefs become. And I do have to agree. This I got from, I believe, from Jay Smith. Yep, from Jay Smith. He actually has one of his sessions. He puts out a PDF of it. So these are the late dates for the Islamic traditions. Okay. So this is the Sirah. Look over here. The Sirah is here, 830. This is where Momo dies, 632. Okay. The Hadiths occur here. Look down here, 870. Look how far this is. Okay. The Abbasids are here. Abd al-Malik is here. Okay. The Abbasids are here. Right. The Tafsir and the commentaries of the Quran are down here in the 900s. I mean, and Muslims want to tell us, but the Bible was like written like in 1957, you know, and it's like a long time after Jesus died, and we've got the Quran like 10 minutes after Momo died, you know, and here we've got the flash drive with the original PDFs, and nonsense. So yeah, guys, so hopefully this was helpful. I will go back. Next time we'll finish here. So this is your homework. Have a look at that. Hopefully this was interesting and educational, and you know, again, do support the channel if you like what I'm doing. And for those who do support the channel, I really, really do appreciate it. It's greatly appreciated. It's a lot of time. As you saw, I've shown you guys like 4 different presentations that I've already completed that I need to make time to actually produce, well, put online to actually do the talks. And besides that, of course, I said I did like 7 hours of streams last week. I did 4 different streams. And so yeah, I didn't have time to do on my own channel. So yeah, hopefully this was educational and helpful. So there's a lot more to the story of Islam than we realize. And they were taking from Plato, and Plato was a communist. And I mean, don't quote me identically on that, but understand there are these connections here. You're welcome, Built for Speed, for answering your questions. See, Zahar, Built for Speed said I'll answer these questions. Do you have any questions, Zahar? So you've got 30 seconds to ask questions. I see the clock above my head here. 30 seconds. Yeah, I mean, I do try and take questions as I go. Nicodemus is good stuff. You are earning the title. Thank you. So guys, I mean, was this new? Was this interesting? Was this valuable? You know, did this make a difference? Did this make you think? You know, is this introducing something that adds connections that we were not aware of? You know, hopefully this adds great value. So thank you, Lloyd. Another stream I'll listen to again. Too many nuggets of info to absorb in one listen. Well, that's great. When are we having a braai? Ons gaan no braai. You know, Dedusa, that's I can do with a braai. Man, oh man. Joining the dots, says James. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I could use a good barbecue. Who can use it? It's freezing outside. It's been snowing for days. Another chapter for the book, Sergeant Rich. Yes, I need to write that book, right? So right. Maria 28 says this is not surprising really. The Greeks had contacts with Arabs, Jews, and Persians since the ancient days. Yes. So why is this not discussed? The fact that these Greek ideas, these Gnostic, pagan, socialist ideas made their way directly into Islam, you know? I have to watch again, says Villainous, missed the first half. And so notice, look, I do try and monitor the comments right in the chat. So I'm genuinely, always discussing the chat. Okay, guys, I'm out of here. It's 9:30. So guys, have a wonderful day wherever you are. Have a wonderful evening. If it's, have a wonderful sleep if you're going to bed after this. Otherwise, have a great Friday, a great weekend, and I'll see you guys on Sunday. Take care, everyone. And Carol B says, I have Bryce at my brother's house. He lived in SA for years and knows a good Bry. Oh, man. If he's around Poland, let me know. Good night, guys. Take care.